Okay, thanks for being here, everyone. We're already 10 past the hour, so just want to quickly give our lunch sponsor, Home Trust Bank, Paul Heathman, 5 minutes to talk a little bit about some lending stuff in the finance world, and then very happy that Badila Sapika from the city planning department is here to talk about the missing middle study. So first, Paul, a couple minutes.
Right now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I don't have too much to say. Although, you guys remember that meeting in December the Federal Reserve was going to have where they were going to like raise interest rates for the last time of the year? That's happening right now. And nobody thinks they're actually going to raise interest rates again, but we'll see. Anything could happen. The market actually, if you'll notice, mortgage rates have been coming down over the last month, right? Thank goodness. And it's been a lot too. I mean, we're talking about, we were like close to 8 or even over 8 for some loan types. And now we're in like the 6s, like high 6s, but 6s, which is, like, if you calculate a payment at, $600,000 or $700,000, that's a huge difference. It makes a difference. So some people can qualify for more than they could before, which puts them just back in the market. And then also, we still expect the interest rates are going to come down, more and more. So as Matt mentioned, my name's Paul Heathman. I work for Home Trust Bank. I'm a mortgage lender. I do a lot of construction lending also. I'm on the board of directors of our Home Builders Association and the chair of our Parade of Homes Committee. If you've ever participated in Parade of Homes, it's a really cool thing to see some really awesome, really like residential sculptures. Some of them really are. But this subject that we're going to be learning about is really near and dear to me. I'm on the Asheville, I'm on our city's Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. So we kind of like review policy, which has been a huge learning curve for me just to like learn about policy in general. But we review policy like land use incentive grants, the way we incentivize development in the city, and try to make it better. Try to bring together different people from developers and builders and experts in all kind of parts of the housing industry, and try to see if we can help council make decisions that will in turn like help the rest of us. So I'm also on the Affordable Housing Committee here at the Board of Realtors, and try to kind of act as a liaison kind of between us and the city. So if you have questions about what we're doing, I may know the answer, or I may know how to get the answer. So join us. That's it. Anybody have questions about rates or Fed policy or lending? I didn't think so. Thanks, Badila. Appreciate you. Thanks for everyone who came today. It means so much to me because this subject is so important for us. And thank you so much for bringing this to us in this way and to the rest of our city. You've been on tour, as I mentioned, all over the place, speaking to different organizations, the Home Builders Association yesterday morning. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, everybody. My name is Badila. Thank you. I'm Badila Savika with the Planning Department. I'm also here with Steph Munson-Dahl and Ellie Gross. Steph is our new Planning Director. You haven't met her. Here she is. Thanks for having us. Like Paul said, we're kind of doing a dog and pony show on what the missing middle housing study is. We've just completed the study after 9 months. We hired consultants based in Berkeley called Opticos to do the study, and we now have this final document that you all can read and download on our project website, but it's 155 pages. So I'll try to cut through and tell you what it's really about. And then if you have questions, you can ask one of us. We can get into it. First, I'll just start with the biggest overview, the title. Why is it called Missing Middle Housing? You've all probably seen this image before. It actually was conceived of by this firm that we hired. And what it shows on the far left are detached single-family houses, and on the far right, larger apartment complexes. And everything in between is what they've termed middle housing. So these are the housing types that were typical in pre-war neighborhoods that have multiple units. They're relatively smaller buildings, and they range everything from the duplex, triplex, cottage court, small apartment buildings. I really think of Montford. This is what middle housing is Montford housing. So this is like a Montfordization study. And to think about what are the barriers keeping more neighborhoods from being more like that. So the study is broken down into 7 chapters, and I'll give you a slide or 2 on each of those chapters. The first chapter is really about why we're doing this. What's the point? We are in a housing crisis, and the chapter talks about that, how housing has grown more and more unaffordable here, and we have many barriers to housing, and it just starts to break that open and to talk about some of the data points and the need for us to figure out what those challenges are, to change our regulations to align with our goals so that we can allow for the growth to happen here, rather than just the price growth, more the supply growth. This image shows the Housing Opportunity Index, which shows the homes sold in the area that have been affordable to a family earning median income. So if this is accurate, back 10 years ago, you can see about 70% of the housing was affordable to those earning a median income. And in recent years, that number has dropped to 20 or 30%. So fewer people can afford housing here. This is from MLS showing the average price of the housing sold in Asheville and Buncombe County over the last 10 years, and it's basically doubled. So it's going up quickly. This is a series of photos I just took from the web this morning to confirm that it's, basically right in line with what it's showing in this report, that sort of larger single-family homes are going for over $1 million, and smaller ones that are 1,500, 1,600 square feet are going for $600 to $700,000. So chapter 2 talks about what missing middle housing is. So when somebody asks you, think they're house scale buildings, multiple units, 1 to 2.5 stories. So typically fit into a residential neighborhood. And they provide more housing choice. So here you can see the live work building. We don't have a lot of these, but provides a place for people to do retail or commercial right below where they live. A cottage court are detached small cottages around shared open space to have a bit of community. Duplexes, fourplexes, all multiplexes are sort of small apartment buildings. When my wife and I were building a house, we rented, there's a triangular building behind Harris Teeter and Trader Joe's, this red brick building that's 3 stories tall. We rented a little apartment in there. It was I think 300 square feet. It was tiny, but it was fabulous for the time of our life when we needed that and didn't need a lot to take care of. So a lot of these housing types are appropriate for different times of lives, and we don't have a lot of those. Chapter 2 also points to some of the rationale and the history behind why middle housing has effectively, why it's considered missing. It's missing because the production has gone down over the years. So currently we have about 5% of our total housing stock as middle housing. So we call it missing. It's effectively missing from housing choice. And to remind you all, 2/3 of Asheville's residential districts are single family only. So, these housing types are not legal in most of Asheville. Chapter 3 looks at the analysis of barriers, and part of that chapter also asks the public, as we had meetings with stakeholders and the public about concerns, and these are some of the key ones. Concern that new construction doesn't benefit me in my community. It can undermine tree canopy, or it may not be affordable. Some of the key barriers are that zoning is outdated or too restrictive. Financing can be challenging, especially with interest rates going up, or hopefully going down now. High cost of land and parking regulations can be over restrictive especially for larger projects. This building that we rented in that I mentioned, when we had a child who was 1, has no parking. 20 unit building, no parking requirements. Because it was built in 1920 something. In the analysis of barriers, we did a renter survey. We reached out to, I think it was over 900 renters, and asked a series of questions. This is just a couple of them. The chart on the left is an answer to which of the following housing types would you consider owning? Select all that apply. And the majority said single family house, but half also said we would like to live in a townhouse, duplex, or triplex. So this is really powerful information, because we don't have a lot of triplexes or duplexes in Asheville. And so this helps us to reiterates that we need to do more to break down those barriers and to permit it, at least to allow it, so that people who want to build it can build it. In the analysis of barriers, this is a little bit getting into the weeds, but what it's showing is that when looking at, well, kind of works. Yeah, when looking at certain zoning districts like RS8, so a single family zoning district, they looked at how the density maximum worked for the different middle housing types, and they give it a red X, which means it's a barrier to 4 or more middle housing types. And that's clear, because in single family districts, you can only have one housing type, single family housing. And so they're saying 1 of 9 housing types is allowed there. So it's a significant barrier from the perspective of middle housing. And they go through, and in the report, you can look at those details. In chapter 4, they look at the financial analysis for some of the things that go into making a proposal. And they highlight here that housing is considered attainable for a certain group when we mean that households within that group can afford to rent, own or rent it without spending more than 30% of their income. And for middle income and the middle housing analysis, they're really looking at the 80 to 120% of area median income population. This is important to know when you're talking to people about the study, because we've got the complaint sometimes that, this isn't affordable housing. Why are you guys doing this? From the perspective of deep affordability, it's true, it's not. But it is a need that is within the sort of middle income earners. And this is there's a significant gap in housing for the average person making the area median income. And that's really what is trying to be addressed in this study. So the consultants looked at several what they call testing of zoning standards. This is looking at a single family district, and on the left, what they show visually here is that you'll typically get what is allowed, which is a single family house with an accessory dwelling unit in the back, may have a garage, and they typically build it out to a large size if they can, to take advantage of the full potential, which can be 4 stories in height, and typically leads to 3 or more parking spaces. And what they're suggesting is to allow for more units, so potentially a duplex in these districts, at least a duplex, with allowing the accessory dwelling unit, so at least three units on a parcel, to orient the structures to the street, and to consider reducing the height of the buildings, because when you open up and liberalize your zoning, there can be pushback if you allow too much, and people freak out. So by capping the height to 2.5 or 3 stories even, it can make it feel more contextual. And so the idea is sort of give a little, right, more density, but take a little from some of the dimensional standards. They're also suggesting allowing parking reductions, that maybe we don't need as much parking, at least when you're close to transit. A lot of cities are not requiring off-street parking and just saying, let the developers and the owners decide whether they need parking. As a policy, consider choosing housing as your priority rather than cars. And the cities that are doing that are seeing more housing built. So when they looked at the financial feasibility of this, what it shows is that this duplex doesn't actually land within that 80 to 120% of AMI. It falls outside of the range, but a lot closer, much closer than the single family house does in this instance. When we look at another zoning district, this is RM6, what you see is that typically with this lot configuration, you would get two homes because you would also have to provide the parking. And so this is really what fits within this district, within this parcel size. And what they're recommending is to allow more units. Under the existing zoning, only 3 units would be allowed. So somebody could come here and actually we got this criticism yesterday. Well, under the recommended, couldn't you allow a 4 homes there? No, we could allow 3 units. They would have to be very small units and you wouldn't have parking. But the consultants are saying, we could allow more units, especially if we reduce the parking requirement and consider, a size cap. So again, when the public looks at this, they say, oh, 4 homes are allowed. That's an increase, but it looks more or less like a single family house. And then when you look at the financials of the model, it shows that the units in this fourplex would be closer to within that range of 80 to 120% AMI. So this is the direction that we need to be going.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The little graph that pops up with the rent on both this slide and the last, I'm curious where those figures came from. Is this assuming in that fourplex, those are 1-bedroom units rented at $2,300 a month? Like, can you give me more details on that?
Not off the top of my head, but I have all those in their financial analysis spreadsheet, so we can share that with you.
And
Yeah.
And this is assuming these would be rental units, both on this slide and the last one, not purchased, because the purchasing of them would not need affordability, only the renting of them.
I believe this is a rental model, and I'm not sure why that decision was made, rental versus purchase. Yeah, I could look back and figure it out.
I thought I heard you say on the last slide, if it was to be a purchase, it would fall much further out of the realm of affordability, but I couldn't say.
Well, the potential rent range would be a lot higher. So if you were renting, I mean, you probably wouldn't be renting a single family, 3,000 square foot single family house. Yeah, the rent range would be higher. I believe that's how they were comparing rent to rent.
I'm not aware of any financing available for one of 4 units in a structure like that for a single owner. The financing would be the whole structure. So maybe.
Right. Yeah. The idea isn't to imply that it would be renting 1 unit. It's just assuming that somebody buys this as an investment and has 4 separate units and they rent them out, the rent would fall within a range of what the study is seeking, more attainable rents. This is another way of looking at it. The idea on the top is that it's really the same amount of square footage in a structure. On the far right, you have a single family detached home. In the middle is that same square footage, but divided up and chosen to be developed as a duplex instead. And on the far left is same square footage, but designed and built as a fourplex. And it's really to show that this is about efficiency, that as you have smaller units, they're more efficient. This is why, homes in this type of product in Montford, like the unit that I rented with my 1-year-old, was more efficient because they were very small units. And so it's trying to highlight the importance of that in our market. And what they're showing here with these professions is that the detached home cost burden can only work for somebody earning a lot. And when you look at the duplex, that cost burden, even for these professionals in our community, a mechanic or a registered nurse, can't afford. They would pay a lot more than 30% of their income to be able to afford to live there. And so only the smaller middle housing units would work for a lot of those professions. And this sort of hits home a new direction that we're seeing in our current market and with the supply chain and cost of labor and construction, that single family homes in new construction are really only affordable to very few people, very few families. You probably all know about that. And a lot of people coming from different cities. And this points to middle housing really only being affordable to middle income. So this is not really, deeply affordable. Chapter 5 looks at what's called a displacement risk assessment. The idea is that if we are going to open up some of our zoning and make changes that will change housing pressure, we want a better idea of how it's going to affect our city and populations. And so they look at 3 things. They look at displacement vulnerability, gentrification, market change, and the built environment. Displacement vulnerability looks at populations and their vulnerability to displacement based on income, education, race, ethnicity, and their tenure, whether they own or rent. Gentrification and market change is looking at recent changes in parts of the city, so where rents have risen more quickly than other parts of the city, or where sales prices have gone up more quickly. And the built environment is looking at where we have infrastructure to support walkability and where there are goods and services available close by so that people don't have to necessarily drive. And so we have different maps that sort of paint this picture and help us to visualize this. So this first one is the Displacement Vulnerability Index. So this is highlighting the darkest colors show where populations are most vulnerable based on these 4 bold-ish factors. So you can see kind of the French Broad neighborhood, Emma, and some other parts are more vulnerable. The gentrification index is looking where sales and rents have gone up more quickly in the city. So the darkest are most recent change. And then this middle housing readiness map is showing the built environment. And so the darkest blue are most walkable, closest to goods and services, closest to transit, and the light blue are those areas that have potential for better walkability and with more investment could be good for middle housing. And then they summarize those in what they call a strategy map. So the green is really the lowest vulnerability where middle housing is ready. These are probably what they're suggesting as the easiest places to roll out changes to allow more housing opportunities. Yellow point to high vulnerability and low rates of change. So you might want to be a little bit cautious there, is what the map says. And then the red are those areas that have high vulnerability and high rates of change. So they suggest that we consider anti-displacement strategies at the same time, so that we're trying to do something to protect any populations that may be pushed out of housing as it's turning over. Even if that housing turns over to end up being in the long term attainable, it might push somebody out, and so we need to think about that. which leads us to the displacement mitigation strategies. So we have about, I think, 14 strategies here, and they're broken up into 3 different categories. If you look on the yellow chart there, you have a house with a little plus, which is a strategy that is looking to provide more housing supply. The house with the hands holding it up is a type of strategy looking at preserving existing housing. And then the house with the individuals is looking at how to protect residents. And this is more short-term protection from displacement. So they propose different strategies that we can look and have a community conversation around. One that we're already talking about, this manufactured housing community preservation zone, is a strategy for protecting mobile home or manufactured housing, because somebody can come in, buy one parcel that may contain 20 families, and they may decide to force them out pretty quickly. And so there are zoning and ordinances that we can pass to preserve and better protect those families pretty quickly. So the recommendations from the study, I'll read this quote from the report. It says, the study found that the existing regulatory context in Asheville encourages single-family housing significantly more than middle housing types. Simply allowing more single-family homes to be built will not move the needle enough to address this housing shortage or increase attainability. And to me, this is a significant finding, because it tells us that even if we find a lot of land, we can't just build our way out of this. We really have to be intentional about trying to create more incentives for the development community to find more efficient housing types. And that's going to take a lot of work. And so the summary of the recommendations are that we should develop a missing middle housing implementation plan, that we should allow middle housing more broadly, focusing on the low-hanging fruit or the most appropriate areas first. We should consider the concurrent rollout of anti-displacement strategies, and to align other standards and requirements to permit these by right, because this isn't just a zoning problem, right? There are problems with our permitting process. Sewer is a whole different body that we have to deal with, and financing is an issue. And so the development community is used to and is comfortable with single family housing, and there's a very strong market for it. So we have to think about these other standards and requirements and other processes to help us figure out how to begin to open up middle housing, and to bring back what Asheville did in the 20s that made some of our greatest neighborhoods here. So we're not starting new, we're trying to bring back the old. This image just shows on one slide all of the recommendations. You're not expected to read this. It's just to show you that it's not an overwhelming list, but a lot of these have deep implications and a lot of work. For example, the first policy. So it's broken up on the far left. These are policy recommendations, in the middle, zoning recommendations, and on the far right, implementation. So the first policy recommendation is to reinforce walkable environments, right? If we want to be more efficient with land, to not require a lot of parking to gobble up this land, we have to move in a direction that's more walkable. So that means we have to move all of our corridors in a direction that have more sidewalks, more bikeability, more support for transit. And these are big investments over many years. But we have to keep doing that if we want a city in the long run that really supports middle housing. So you can look at that in the report. Just last 2 slides, I think. This is where we are sort of in our public outreach and engagement. We've been presenting to boards and commissions and groups like yours. We're going to City Council on January 9th, where we'll be talking about some of the overview, as well as some framework for implementation, how this can work, how quickly we can move this forward, because we all know that housing is a big issue, and the longer we wait, the more prices go up. So action is important. And I'll turn it over to you for questions. Thank you.
Are you going to HRC later today?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. HRC in the evening. Yeah.
So when we're talking about building like the middle housing, are you looking at putting a cap on income of who can live there, or is it just open for everyone? Because what stops people who make $225,000 a year from going, hey, this is cheaper, I just want to do this instead?
Yeah. No, we can't control pricing. So you're right. If we're super successful and can create all kinds of housing, it can be gobbled up by global capital. That's beyond our control. But without the, I think it's important that we try, because there are a lot of people here who are looking for opportunities, and so.
Yeah, it might be a good thing if someone who's a 60-year-old couple that doesn't want to have a 3,000 square foot house doesn't take that 3,000 square foot house and instead leaves it for a family.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm saying things wrongly, but from the direction that I see that Asheville City and Buckley County, we're going in the opposite direction. Like Woodfin, you have to have half an acre to build on. Used to be a quarter of an acre. Now you have to have a bigger piece of property for one house.
Oh, they changed their zoning to make bigger lots?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, and I'm just kind of seeing that, a lot more restrictions in Buncombe County, like on your mobile homes. You have to replace it in 30 days, or you can't start up a mobile home anymore. So I kind of see it going the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
And am I incorrect in what Buncombe County?
I don't know much about what other jurisdictions are doing, and we need to understand that well and have more conversations. Because, for example, the manufactured housing overlay consideration is something, if we roll it out, it makes sense that we roll it out with Buncombe County and Woodfin, because most of the manufactured housing is on the outskirts or the periphery of Asheville, and then it really kind of takes over more in the county. I guess I would just say, I think of this as similar to coming into a grocery store and having variety. Like, imagine if we went into a grocery store and you could only buy apples in the produce section. That really limits supply, and it creates a challenging market that makes it a problem, and prices don't work well. I think housing is the same. One option is to, sort of close the doors, so to speak, which would be creating more restrictions, making it more difficult for housing types, different types of housing to be built. And I think what we see from other cities who have done that or have struggled is that pricing goes up more quickly. So, jurisdictions have that option, but doesn't seem like the market is favorable. It seems like the pricing will likely go up because there's going to be fewer opportunities to buy housing in Woodfin, if that's the case. Fewer lots, fewer housing. And so, yeah, I guess we'll see how it turns out, but probably prices are going to go up more quickly. Did you have?
Yeah. One, I want to say thanks so much for putting all this time and energy into this. I can imagine being in your position, you're trying to make really well-informed strategic decisions, and I just appreciate all the thoughtfulness that's gone into this. Thank you very much. One lingering thought, and maybe it's just a question or a conversation for the audience, it's very interesting to hear what you said, Paul, that you're not familiar of any financing product that can actually finance one of those units to someone. It seemed like from the study of renters, most people were saying, I'm not really interested in that type of product. I think that will change once it's more readily available and it's affordable. I think attitudes will invariably shift on that. But like, how do we finance that? And like, how do we get it to the people once it's out there?
Yeah. Yeah.
I also had that question. Can't you just are you saying that you can't condo a fourplex?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any examples of that.
I
Also,
know
like,
there's duplexes here that are condos.
there's also like Fannie and Freddie have requirements around certain percentages of the units in any given building can't exceed there can't be a certain number owned by one entity, or a certain number can't be rentals in order for them to be like qualified like condo associations you have to buy them like outside of the qualified mortgage category, which pushes the risk and rate much higher. So it's like subprime financing. Yeah, I mean, the solution to financing and instead of creating a community of renters, create a community of homeowners is to do like more like row houses, to have townhomes essentially, where you would own the land. And Barry Bialik of the Thirsty Mom Compact Cottages, longtime AHAC member, has a great example of this. The Atkins project in South Asheville, Atkins Road.
Atkins Street.
Atkins
Yeah,
Street.
yep. Mhm.
He's done this. He did a 0 lot line, or like a drip edge, if you're familiar, land ownership model where the association owns most of the yards, but you own the land directly under it. Yeah, it's also, the row houses in a lot of areas are more simple to build because it's flat. Here, some of the builders yesterday morning were saying that on a sloping lot, creating one very large foundation on a slope could be more expensive than creating several small foundations. But yeah, I mean, I think to your point, we're not trying to build a city of all one thing, just trying to open the doors to allowing whatever is possible. And would we have some buildings that have a 4-unit rental, and would that be okay? Certainly. Is that what we want everybody to live in? No, not necessarily. So I think it's the mix, the way I see it.
Yeah, we need a lot more options. I think the point about it's easier people want fee simple properties. That's what builders want to do. It's easier for lending. In bigger cities, you see a lot more of sort of the condoization products, and we don't have a lot of that here. Maybe we will in time, but what cities that are doing a lot of missing middle they're trying to find ways to allow more fee simple development. So, for example, Portland allows basically townhomes. Here we require that townhome has to face a street. Every parcel has to have street frontage. In Portland, they allow, imagine a row of 4 homes, but instead of facing the street, you can have one on the street and then the 3 inward. So they don't have frontage, which most lots are deeper than they are wide. So that makes a lot more sense. And then you can still have the fee simple property. And so we have to think creatively about both how to allow fee simple properties and to create, I think, mechanisms so that we can get these other types of small apartment homes that have, whether it's a 5-plex or a 10-plex or a 20-plex, as options as investors and builders want to come in and do that.
What do you see as the obstacles moving forward to changes in the UDF? So,
I think a lot of zoning changes it's all about trade-offs, right? And it's all about sort of community impacts. So when we allow for more housing, there's some concern and real impacts with, say, tree canopy loss, right? So it's all trying to balance things out. I think when we move this forward, we're probably going to have to implement lot coverage standards to ensure that we get development that tends to be on small footprints and doesn't take up the whole parcel, so we have more tree protection and tree preservation. But it's all trade-offs, and I think it's important that we try to get the zoning in place quickly, because it takes a long time to make a development, to have the community change over time. Like a lot of these, for example, sidewalk standards. Our sidewalk standards are really outdated and should have been updated 10 years ago so that all the development that happened from then to now would have built out sidewalks. And that was a lost opportunity. But, what's the expression? The best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, and that next best time is now. And so I think a lot of these things, council will be urging us to make those changes. And as quickly as we can engage with the community, I think, and get community buy-in, likely we'll see some changes.
If I can add, it's council really is the proposed changes are coming as early as January to the UDF. And it's council, but it's more often the people who show up to the council meetings in opposition. Almost nobody shows up to those meetings for something, right? They're there. And if you take buyers around to homes, maybe you do or don't hear that people don't want a single family home next to an apartment building. But certainly that's the case all over Montford, and nobody seems to hate on Montford for that.
We have lots of examples of that in a lot of neighborhoods. I just think it's the awareness that they're there.
Yeah.
Right.
Certainly if you live in a single family home neighborhood where it's exclusively that, those people that live there, if you ask them if they would mind if we started building apartment buildings between each house, they would show up to city council meetings and freak out, So yeah, I think this group, Matt's already doing it, coming to council meetings, representing this group, and trying to help housing in general. Well, all of you could come to those meetings and be voices. We all get our 3 minutes in front of council.
And to remember when you're talking to people, language is important. That we're trying to re-legalize what Asheville permitted for many years, long time ago, that led to great parts of Asheville that are now illegal. And so we're trying to create more housing options, more housing variety, so that everybody can age in place and they don't have to go. Steph says that in her neighborhood, a lot of individuals or older couples live in huge homes, and they would love to stay in their neighborhood, but the only option is really a huge home. So I think, language can help people think about this. This isn't about apartment buildings coming into a single family neighborhood. It's really, we're talking about, a few more units that are at the same scale as a house.
The parking question, or the parking issue right now, do I have it right that it's 1 parking space is required per bedroom right now?
Right now, if you have 2 bedrooms or less in a house, you're required 1 parking space. If you have 3 or more bedrooms, you need 2 parking spaces.
Okay.
Yeah, and the consultants are suggesting that we move to either 1 parking space per unit, regardless of bedrooms, as a standard, or to consider not requiring off-street parking, or or make it specific to the district. If you're close to transit, you're exempted.
Okay. Well,
depending on
developers talk a lot about how the space needed for parking is a problem that some of them would develop if you're close enough to the city. Yeah. Right.
We wouldn't have got the housing stock in Montford if we had parking standards like we do today. So I think it's really weighing in on, or focusing in on, do we want to prioritize housing or cars? It's really that simple. If we prioritize cars, there may not be as many issues, but what I see in reading from other cities is you prioritize housing, you get more housing, and then if there are issues on the streets, policy will come up with solutions, or there'll be more incentive to find better transit or better bicycling or better pedestrian connections.
Well, not to put you on the spot, but any other concerns the Builders Association had when they got this presentation? You were there for that.
Yeah, we had a lot of really engaged discussion about that. One thing I think was brought was that a large development oftentimes gets a lot of help in the planning procedure or in the, getting to groundbreaking, whereas like a developer that was gonna try to do a duplex, triplex, maybe was like, didn't have as much help for it.
Right.
And that's a huge challenge to what is, because a big developer probably doesn't even mess around with stuff that we're calling missing middle. It's really like the association members, right, that are trying to build like a duplex or something.
Right. So the smaller developers are more averse from taking risk in something like a triplex when they know that single families are bread and butter. They know it, and it's easy, and they hear horror stories or concerns from people who have tried a triplex and maybe not had good luck, or it's taken them longer to go through the permitting process. These things are changing. You may be aware that the state statute was changed, and now you can build up to a 4-family structure with the residential building code. There's some things that have to work out with that, but previously it's only 1 and 2 families, so only up to duplex was the residential building code, but a triplex would trigger the commercial building code, which is more expensive because you need a different plumbing. Sprinklers, right, that are more expensive. So that's all changing. The whole state is moving in a direction where the code will be easier to build a 4-plex and less. But that's going to take probably a year or 2 to kind of work itself out.
Financing was brought up, just being not necessarily like we've been talking about, like for someone to get a purchase mortgage for a unit, but financing the construction of these projects, and it being like commercial money on these larger projects is kind of a more common thing, but you guys probably know Alfie loans some hard money options around like to do like a smaller project. It's very, very expensive, and it's the access to it. So like that was definitely another issue that was brought up yesterday.
Right.
And definitely, I think one of them described like the situation of getting everything together, the zonings fixed, we get everything fixed, and then the sewer and water aren't available to do the density that you want to do it, and years away. And then that's also a cost, a major cost to being able to do some density. So yeah, there's like a lot of things that have to come together here.
Yeah, they suggested that we figure out a way to create a model where somehow the city, maybe with a partner or something, we create an example for how to do this, so that the city isn't just saying, great, we have a study, you guys go do it now, but that we somehow collaborate with maybe some builders to walk hand hold through the process and try to do everything we can to make it work, and then to try to replicate it and figure out where the bottlenecks are, where the red tape is, and to try to make it viable so that it's a real example.
One other comment. I think as we move forward, it was helpful when we reviewed the food truck initiative a while back, where we looked at a lot of other cities and we learned what not to do and what to do. So I don't know if that's a part of this whole process, but if there are cities that have adopted changes that allowed for missing middle in residentially zoned, we should look at that, because I think that resonates with the common person. Oh, they did it and it worked really well.
Yeah.
Rather than just stats and a presentation from a consultant.
Yeah, for sure. We're doing that now. And the other cities have been doing this at least for several years, so we can already learn from their best practices, what hasn't worked, I was actually on a call yesterday with somebody in Portland who was telling me about things that we should consider. And so definitely doing that.
We had a girl from Buffalo come in to town one time.
Bernice
Bernice,
Rouse.
yeah. No parking.
Bernice Rouse, yeah, Incremental Development Alliance, all those are great resources for this kind of thing.
And I have a question about the rent issue in other parts of the country. They are doing rent control. They're dealing with issues um, the property, whether it's a duplex or a triplex, turning over, and every time it turns over, the rents go up and they go up and they go up. And so, they're using rent control as a way to just kind of keep that as a moderate thing, not a.
Yeah.
Big.
Just allowing large leaps in pricing. Yeah. So unfortunately, we only have control over certain things. The state controls certain regulations that exempt us from even considering them, and one of them is rent control. So maybe at some point that'll change, because this whole movement across is sweeping across the United States, and different states, state legislators, different states are creating regulations to basically mandate middle housing, to allow, I think Oregon allows every single parcel to have up to a duplex or triplex, regardless of city codes, or that city codes have to allow that. So this is all moving very quickly, because this isn't unique to Asheville. It's really cities everywhere have not been responsive to their housing needs for many years.
Yeah, I think Washington State is going to. And I'm happy to share with anybody, NAR, and some other organizations have some really studies on rent control and how it may not be as beneficial as we hope it would be at first blush. There are other unintended consequences. So I'm happy to share that with everybody.
Can you also mention community land trust? Because that's also a similar way to keep prices for homeowners under control.
Do you want to talk? You probably know a little bit more about it.
Well, just to know how many people here know that we do have a community land trust. It's very small. Hopefully it'll be growing here in the region, but instead of it being a rent control, it's really more like a housing price control. And the idea being that the homeowner owns the house, but not the land underneath it. The land is owned in perpetuity by a trust. They keep that land price way down. So the homeowner goes in and buys the land or buys the house at an amount that is predetermined. When they sell that house, it can only be sold for an increment above that. So they're able to build some wealth, but they're not doing the doubling in 10 years that you saw. And it allows that next buyer to take advantage of a home still being in an affordable range, right? So it's going to keep that line lower than it would be under normal market conditions and benefit someone who's owning it. It's a very a good option right now. They are like the community land trust works a lot with the city to get money, and also with Dogwood Health Trust, and to do like first time homeowner stuff.
Where's an example of that, of community land trust?
They're all over the country. Asheville's is way behind the curve. So you can look up the Durham Community Land Trust. It's been around for 30 years. There's one in Alexandria, Virginia, Washington.
Here at all?
That's the one I just told you about. It's called the Asheville Buncombe Community Land Trust. So they probably only own a handful of homes right now. But usually what happens is they kind of get bigger over time. They'll have those holdings. But in other places like Washington, D.C., they've had philanthropy come in and just buy up a group of homes and double the housing stock that can be in that community land trust. And that's really the way to grow a land trust, is to have philanthropy come in.
And how do you determine who the buyer is?
There's a whole program. People have to go through application periods, and it's a national model. But it came out of in 2014. The city did a study called Alternatives to Gentrification. We ordered that study in conjunction with doing a lot of work in the River Arts District. I wanted to make sure there were ways for us to slow down the rapid growth of home prices in the South French Broad area and the South Side. At the time, the homes in that district were selling for the highest price per square foot of any homes in the city of Asheville, even though people didn't think of it as a flip, but they're small. And so what came out of it was, the city started a community land trust with community partners and spun it off.
He posted it in a couple of things. It's great.
Right.
And yeah, to your point, we just need to support it because it is so young.
It is so young and, 10 or 20 years from now, you'll look back at it and be like, wow, this is really great that this is like a stable institution in our, city. Yeah. Thanks.
So if you want to lead other people to this website, asheville.nc.gov/missing middle, we have some videos on there, very short videos that sort of talk about what it is. If you want to share those with people you work with or others, and yeah, if you have any questions, you can contact us here or on the website. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.